Welcome back. Today we're diving into Ana Huang's Twisted Lies.
Yeah, this one really got people talking.
It seems like readers either loved it or hated it,
And a lot of strong opinions out there.
but with over 46,000 ratings and a solid 4.119 stars on Goodreads, it's clearly a book that's, well, sparking conversation.
It's definitely not a book that just sits quietly on a shelf.
So let's start with the heart of it, the characters, Stella and Christian.
Especially Christian. He seems to be at the center of a lot of the strong feelings.
Some find him intoxicating, that classic alpha male,
Exactly, that possessive, powerful kind of archetype. But for others, it crosses a line.
into obsessive, even problematic territory.
Especially for a modern romance.
In Stella, some reviewers felt like she wasn't quite the strong female lead we've seen from Huang in the past,
Right. And there were criticisms that she was almost too submissive.
which really taps into the whole debate about power dynamics in romance.
What one reader finds empowering, another might see as a harmful trope.
It all comes down to personal preference.
And interpretation.
Okay, so before we get too deep into the weeds of those debates, let's set the scene. What's the story here?
Twisted Lies throws us into a forbidden romance.
Forbidden how?
Well, we've got Stella. She works at a security firm, and Christian, her client.
A client who also happens to be a billionaire CEO.
Exactly. There's that undeniable attraction, and things escalate pretty quickly.
So we're talking a passionate, all-consuming kind of affair.
Definitely. But it's not all champagne and roses. There's a darkness running beneath the surface.
The dark, yes.
Obsession is a big theme in Twisted Lies.
And I'm guessing how readers feel about Christian plays a big role in how they see that obsession.
Absolutely. Some see it as this dangerous edge to the romance, it adds that thrill.
But for others, it's unhealthy, maybe even toxic.
Exactly. Then there are those comparisons to 50 Shades of Grey.
Ah, yes. That came up in a lot of the reviews we looked at.
The themes are definitely there, especially around BDSM.
But some felt like Twisted Lies didn't bring anything particularly new to the table.
Right. Some felt like it was retreading familiar territory.
Okay, so we've talked about the characters and the overall vibe. What about the writing itself?
Ana Huang's style, much like her characters, seems to be pretty divisive.
We saw some critiques about repetitive phrasing
Yes, and a lot of internal monologues.
and those alternating points of view, Stella and Christian. Did that work for readers?
It's a mixed bag, really. Some liked getting both perspectives, felt like it added depth.
Made you understand their motivations?
Exactly. But others, they felt like it was repetitive, just going back and forth over the same things.
And of course, no conversation about Ana Huang would be complete without mentioning the steamy scenes.
Oh, she definitely knows how to turn up the heat.
But even those got mixed reactions. Some loved the intensity, but others felt like they overshadowed the plot.
Like there wasn't enough substance.
So we're seeing a pretty clear split in opinions. But this book is undeniably popular. There's something keeping readers hooked.
A lot of the reviews mentioned just how addicting it is.
That page-turner quality, even if they had criticisms, they couldn't put it down.
You get swept up in the story. The fast pace, the drama.
But what about those who loved it? What were they connecting with?
I think for a lot of readers, it was the intensity of the romance. Even if Christian's possessiveness is problematic in reality, it's alluring in fiction.
It's that bad boy appeal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Plus, the forbidden aspect of their relationship, the high stakes.
It's a real roller coaster of emotions.
Oh, absolutely. Passion, obsession, drama, it's all there. And even if the execution isn't perfect, Huang definitely tapped into something primal.
Something that resonates.
For sure. And we saw comments about the epilogue. Some felt like it redeemed some of the book's weaker points.
Given the ending they were hoping for.
Right. But for others, it felt rushed, like it didn't fully address the complicated nature of their relationship.
So even the ending is divisive.
It seems like that's the theme with Twisted Lies. You either love it or hate it, but you definitely have an opinion.
Speaking of opinions, there's a lot of discussion about Christian's possessiveness.
Especially early on. Some readers felt like his behavior was straight up stalkerish, a major red flag.
It seems like that's a big part of the debate. How much can we excuse in the name of love?
Or in the name of a good story.
And that's a question we'll be exploring further as we dive deeper into Twisted Lies.
Stay tuned, we've got a lot more to unpack.
So we left off talking about how Twisted Lies really gets people talking.
And one thing that kept coming up in those conversations was the writing style.
Yeah. Ana Huang has a very distinct style.
A lot of internal monologues.
And that's something that some readers, well, that just doesn't work for them.
They found it a bit repetitive.
Especially some of those phrases, like my breath hitched.
My heart stuttered.
Oh,
We saw those mentioned a lot.
It's either a style you love or you just can't stand it.
And I think that ties into the pacing, too.
Right.
Like, did the story keep you hooked the whole way through? I think most readers agree that the first half was really gripping. You get sucked in by that forbidden romance, the chemistry, the mystery.
But then things seem to slow down a bit.
After that initial conflict is resolved, there's definitely a shift in the pacing.
And some of the subplots maybe weren't as engaging.
Some readers even admitted to skimming those parts.
Skipping them altogether.
Which, again, I think goes back to the writing style.
Yeah.
If those internal monologues aren't your thing, it's going to affect how you experience the story.
Okay, let's talk about Christian, specifically his controlling behavior.
Ah, yes. Christian. The ultimate debate.
Because some readers were totally into it.
They loved the possessiveness, the jealousy, the whole alpha male thing.
But for others, it was a huge turnoff.
Unhealthy. A bit disturbing, even.
It raises some interesting questions about how we portray toxic masculinity in romance novels.
Because, yeah, flawed characters can be compelling. But there's a line between flawed and straight-up romanticizing harmful behavior.
And it seems like Twisted Lies kind of dances on that line.
Christian is definitely complex. He's got issues. But the book doesn't really condemn his actions.
It leaves a lot up to the reader's interpretation.
Which I think is part of why people have such strong feelings about it.
And Stella. There was some debate about whether she was truly a strong female character.
Yeah. Some readers felt like she was too passive, too easily manipulated by Christian.
They wanted to see her stand up for herself more.
Others, though, they saw her vulnerability as strength.
They appreciated how she gradually gained confidence throughout the story.
Again, it comes down to individual interpretation.
The BDSM themes also sparked some discussion.
Some readers thought they were well integrated into the story.
Added that extra level of excitement and eroticism.
But for others, it felt a bit surface level, like it lacked the depth you often see in books that really explore BDSM relationships.
It feels like Twisted Lies tried to do a lot. Romance, suspense, mystery, BDSM.
Maybe a little too much.
It's possible that all those elements didn't quite come together in a completely cohesive way. What about the ending? What were your thoughts?
Personally, I felt like it was a bit rushed.
Predictable.
Yeah, it wrapped everything up neatly, but it didn't feel entirely earned. I would like to see a more nuanced resolution.
One that acknowledged just how complicated their relationship was.
Exactly. And some reviewers felt like the epilogue was tacked on.
Almost like an afterthought.
Maybe to appease the readers who wanted a more traditional happy ending.
Or maybe it was always part of the plan, and it just didn't resonate with everyone.
It just goes to show you can't please everyone.
Absolutely. Different readers are going to connect with different aspects of the story. And that's what makes these conversations so interesting. It's not just about whether you like the book or not.
Right.
It's about what it made you think about, what it revealed about your own beliefs and experiences.
Twisted Lies is definitely one of those books that sticks with you.
For better or for worse.
Exactly. It gets under your skin, makes you question things.
Okay, let's zoom out a little bit. Look at the bigger picture.
Okay.
Twisted Lies. It's part of a series.
Right. It's the first book in the Twisted series.
Did it feel like a complete story on its own? Or did it leave you wanting more?
Well, it definitely has a self-contained plot.
You get a resolution.
But there are definitely some loose ends, questions that aren't answered, characters whose stories aren't finished.
Which makes sense, being part of a series.
So if you're really hooked on Ana Huang's world, you're going to want to keep reading.
But if you prefer standalone romances, maybe stick to something else.
At least for now.
A lot of readers were hesitant to pick up Twisted Lies because of the controversial themes.
Understandably so. It deals with some pretty heavy stuff.
Obsession, control, the power imbalances in relationships.
It's not a light and fluffy read.
You need to go into it with a certain level of maturity and awareness.
It's not for everyone.
And that's okay.
Absolutely. It's about knowing your own limits, what you're comfortable with.
And respecting other people's choices.
Exactly. Just because a book isn't for you doesn't mean it's a bad book.
Speaking of choices, let's talk about the role of social media.
Okay.
Because it seems like social media plays a huge role in shaping how we perceive books these days.
Oh, absolutely. Books are dissected, analyzed, hyped up.
before most people have even had a chance to read them,
And it can definitely influence your expectations.
in your experience of the book itself.
Twisted Lies is a perfect example. The hype was huge.
It became this phenomenon.
And that probably contributed to both its popularity and the very divided reactions.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
Any final thoughts before we move on?
I think Twisted Lies is more than just a romance novel. It's a conversation starter. It forces you to think about things.
To confront some uncomfortable truths about love, relationships, power.
Whether you loved it or hated it, it definitely stays with you.
It's almost like Twisted Lies is a Rorschach test for readers. You know, what you see in those characters, what you take away from the story.
It reveals a lot about your own beliefs, about love, relationships, power dynamics even.
Some people saw Christian as this romantic hero. Others, they saw a toxic, controlling kind of guy.
Yeah.
And it really sparked conversations about what's acceptable, you know, what are our expectations in a relationship.
And those expectations change. What might have felt edgy a few years ago could be completely off-putting now.
We're constantly learning, growing, and I think that influences how we read these stories.
Definitely. And it's so important to be a mindful reader, to really think about the messages these books are sending, the narratives they're putting out there.
Okay, before we wrap things up, let's revisit the ending. That always seems to be a point of contention.
Yeah, those last few chapters can make or break a book for some readers.
And with Twisted Lies, we saw, well, some mixed reactions.
Some people loved it, that sense of closure, that peek into the future.
That happily ever after.
But others felt it was too neat, too easy, like it didn't acknowledge the messiness of their relationship.
And the epilogue. That seems to be a particularly divisive element.
Some people felt like it redeemed the whole book. Others, they felt it was unnecessary, almost an afterthought.
It just goes to show you, every reader brings their own hopes and baggage to a story. You can't please everyone.
And that's okay.
I think even when an ending doesn't meet our expectations, it can still lead to interesting conversations. Like, what did we want to see happen? What would have felt more satisfying? What does that tell us about ourselves?
Right. These books, they're not just entertainment. They're a way to explore complex themes, to challenge our own perspectives.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Twisted Lies, I'm curious, what are your big takeaways?
Well, I think the biggest one is just how subjective reading is. One person's trash is another person's treasure.
Exactly, and that's okay. Embrace those different perspectives. Have those conversations, even if they get a little heated.
And remember, it's okay to disagree. You don't have to love every book.
And sometimes, the books we hate the most are the ones that teach us the most about ourselves.
It's so true.
Well, this has been fascinating. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Twisted Lies.
And remember, you can find a link in the description for a free 30-day trial with Audible. You can use it to check out Twisted Lies or any other book that piques your interest.
Happy reading, everyone!